If Syracuse football wasn't ready for the big stage last week against Clemson, then what's the answer after an absolute domination from North Carolina football on the road? 40-7, the final score as a top 15 Tar Heel squad rolls through the orange, and Drake May did Drake May things. We'll have our reporter, Braden Reed, live from Chapel Hill, and we'll have so much more to tell you about Syracuse's second straight loss on Orange Press Pass. It starts now. Welcome into Orange Press Pass from our CitrusTV studios. Ian Nicholas alongside Ryan Bridges and Skyler Wilkes. Not a lot of fun things to talk about. Plain and simple, Syracuse dominated like they haven't been so far this season. And there's a lot of things we can touch on, but Ryan, your first takeaway from the most disappointing result of the fall.
I mean, why does it take this team so long to start playing, Skyler? I feel like they just haven't gotten into the rhythm of getting out on that first drive and getting off on the right foot. We saw it last week with Clemson. The Dan Valori show showed up in the second half, but that wasn't until the Orange were down 14-0, and then you can't get a score until after halftime. You're down 27-0 going to the break. That is, you cannot do that in these types of games against these type of opponents. You've got to start out better and build some momentum early on in the game.
It didn't just happen against those two teams, it happened against Western Michigan and Army, if you remember. But my big thing is they can't compete against these top-tier teams in the ACC. That's 2 weeks in a row where they've been flat out dominated. 3 touchdowns in 2 games. That is pretty awful, and it just gets tougher after this, so a lot to work on for the Syracuse team.
Pretty awful. Skyler coming out hot, and there wasn't a lot of awful from North Carolina. You don't put up 40 points if you're not really good. So we're going to show you the highlights from this game, and a lot of them are Tar Heel highlights. Beware, be warned. You're getting into a pretty ugly set of highs here. Let's see how it all shook up from Chapel Hill. 4-0 for the first time since 1997. It's a sold-out crowd from Kenan Stadium. In 3-0 Tar Heels, but a blocked punt. Dennis Jacquez gets one off of Ben Kiernan, and then the Ireland native drops the hammer and converts on 4th down. Dino Babers challenged it, but they said he picked up the 4th down conversion. Later in the drive, Drake May scores on a QB sneak. It's now 10-0 North Carolina. He gets it done through the air, too. Little Bryson Nesbitt rainbow pass over Amon Greenwood for the touchdown, but Skyler, he continued to do things like that.
Yeah, Drake May had quite the day. If you thought that pass was pretty, what about this one? 48 yards to Nate McCollum, who had an absolute field day. 7 catches, 135 yards from the Syracuse secondary.
Not looking good for Syracuse in the first half, but as I said before, they finally woke up. Ensuing drive, LaQuint Allen caps off a drive that had more yards on offense than the entire first half for the Orange.
You want more yards, Ryan? How about this? Kobe Paysour somehow catches this pass. Not a good throw from Drake May. He had plenty of good ones on the game. This throw, a 76-yard touchdown, puts him for over 400 passing yards on the afternoon. 3rd time in his career, but he's done that at UNC. It's a 30-point game late in the 3rd quarter, but Syracuse still can't catch a break. Elijah Huzzy with the interception, and then they change quarterbacks thinking that's going to help them out. Carlos Del Rio Wilson throws it, and he also throws an interception. Amari Campbell gets the loose findings, and UNC rolls to a 47 victory. A lot of ugly stats for Syracuse. You're about to see some of them right now. A rough day at the box office for Garrett Schrader, Ryan.
Yeah, and they didn't take any deep shots in the first half or even in the second half. And you see Umari Hatcher on that screen. The one time they took a deep shot in this game was to him. He brought it in with a great catch for 34, something that this Syracuse team needs to do going forward.
The deep ball was non-existent, Ryan. That wasn't even a good throw from Garrett Schrader. Umari Hatcher just made a great catch. And Nate McCollum, he was having, like I said, had a really easy day against the Syracuse secondary who looked lost all afternoon.
Somebody who did not have an easy day. He makes the hard work look easy for us here at CitrusTV. Our reporter live from Chapel Hill, Braden Reed. Braden, this was the first blowout of this season for the Orange, but it wasn't the first blowout of the Dino Babers era. 12th loss of 30 or more since Babers took over in 2016. Was there any element of this year's blowout that was reminiscent to those of the past under Babers' leadership?
Well, Ian, first of all, I appreciate the kind words. To answer your question, it's a good one. None come to mind, really. In terms of Syracuse didn't make a ton of mistakes, at least a ton of mental mistakes, right? You think about Syracuse, they've lost a lot of games because of mental mistakes, penalties late in games, but this game they were just completely outmatched. One that comes to mind for me, Florida State last year, I think that was a 38-3 game. That's a team they're seeing next week, so they got to get ready for them. Jordan Travis, Trey Benson in that game went off against the Syracuse defense. So, like I said, it just felt like more of a talent disparity in this game. Garrett Schrader talked about in his post-game press conference, he was happy with their game plan. It was more just about execution, part of that just being how talented this Tar Heel team was overall.
Hey, Braden, what was Dino Babers' reaction to that first down that came off of that block punt? Changed a lot of momentum with the game. He seemed pretty animated on the sidelines. What did he say after the game, and what were his thoughts?
Yeah, so during the game, he was not happy about it. They initially reviewed it and they saw it on the screen. They confirmed that it was a first down. Dino Babers was out on the field. The referees told him we reviewed it already. It was a first down. We're sticking with it. Dino Babers said, I want it on the record. I'm throwing this flag just so you guys have to go back and review it. They did that. Obviously, it did not change the call. He did say they changed their tune, though. They said instead of confirming that it was a first down, they said there wasn't that conclusive evidence to overturn it, but he made it very well known, both out on the field during the game and his press conference after the game, that he disagreed with that call. He told us how much of a good angle that he had over on the sideline, just over there to my right, so he vehemently disagreed with it and made it known during the game and after it.
Braden, Drake May had all the hype leading up into this game, a Heisman candidate, potentially ACC Player of the Year a year ago, and a potential top 5 draft pick, and he lived up to all of it. With over 440 yards, 3 touchdowns, 70% completion percentage. What impressed you the most about the future top 5 pick?
Yeah, he is just so poised. He obviously has the talent. Everybody knows about it. We're all talking about how he's all ACC first team. He might be a Heisman candidate, might go high in this year's draft. Has the talent, that's unquestioned. Everybody knew it coming in. But just the poise he showed, the leadership he showed. They got a lot on offense going for him in this game. They had a lot of easy throws, a lot of easy carries. But when stuff did break down, he didn't panic. He's mature, stood back there in the pocket, made throws deep down the field to the sideline as well. He just wasn't phased at all. When the Syracuse defense did find a way to make him a little uncomfortable, made those big-time throws, was able to scramble outside the pocket, make plays out of structure, which is what makes him such an enticing prospect looking ahead in his career.
What else is enticing for you tonight is watching the Phillies play the Braves, and I'm sure you want to do that right about now. So we won't hold you too much longer, Braden. Thanks so much for doing the hard work down there in Chapel Hill, and maybe enjoy some winning baseball tonight. We'll be right back here on Orange Press Pass, where we've got so much more to talk about. A lot of bad from Syracuse, and also going back to last season, how early season losses have killed the Cuse. That and so much more when we're right back on the other side.
Welcome to an excellent episode of Live from Studio B.
North Carolina rolls Syracuse football 40-7. I'm Ian Nicholas. Thanks so much for joining us here on Citrus TV. Now, as North Carolina native J. Cole says, let me take you back like I do so well. I might not do this well, but I'll try to encapsulate what I want to say here. Syracuse football went into last year's Clemson game undefeated, 6-0, top 15 team in the country, had a lead on the Tigers, a double-digit lead at the half, and then they blew it. And yes, that's the Clemson Tigers. That's a top 10 team in the country. After that, the team spiraled out of control, lost 5 games straight, limped into the Pinstripe Bowl, and lost to Minnesota. This season, sure, maybe Syracuse isn't the same team talent-wise, but 4-0 start, and again, another big matchup against Clemson, they lose that one too. And what happens the next game? They get rolled, just like in last year's Notre Dame game after the Clemson game. So what is it? Why does this team not have that juice, that spunk in these big-time games? Head coach Dino Babers explains.
The bottom line is we got to fight. And I don't know what's going to happen next week. They're really good. And, we're going to go all the way down there, and they're going to have a huge crowd, and we're going to have to see how we do. But we'll show up.
Just got to figure out who wants to play. And, we had a couple guys out there that really wanted it. And, but we'll really take a deep look in the mirror this week and get ready for next week. It's going to be a tougher game next week in Death Valley.
Garrett Schrader couldn't have understated that anymore. At the top 10 Florida State team next week, a team that has a clear path to a college football playoff. We're going to talk about who wanted it today and who didn't want it in the 33-point blowout to North Carolina. Please stay with us here on Orange Press Pass. Back to the desk alongside Ryan Bridges and Skyler Wilkes after the 40-7 win for number 14 North Carolina over Syracuse. And Ryan, only 7 points, a first half where Syracuse only had 4 first downs. And you got to think part of that is because of the offensive play calling from coordinator Jason Beck.
Yeah, I mean, as I said in our previous segment, we've seen this team be condensed down to just such a small playbook. It's these simple slants, simple under routes, and just little dump offs that the Orange are trying to, do and make it all the way down the field with these simple dump offs. They need chunk plays. This team is making too many small mistakes, and it's because they need to stack up so many plays in a row to get to that point. They need to start taking more deep shots, throw the ball down the field, trust some of the guys that you have out there, because slowly moving the ball down the field, that's not going to help them win games, Scott.
I think Jason Beck just doesn't trust his quarterback very much in Garrett Schrader, but you're right, the play calling was not very good. Only 3.3 yards per carry for a team that averages over 4 a game. LaQuinn Allen was stifled, and Garrett Schrader only averaged 8 yards per attempt on 21 passes. That's pretty disgraceful. You have weapons. Umari Hatcher, Donovan Brown have elite speed. Utilize it. Utilize your weapons against a UNC team that is not known for its defense. You had a chance to really take advantage, and Jason Beck failed to do it again.
What North Carolina is known, though, for Skyler, is the weapons that they have offensively. Tez Walker back in the fold today after his suspension was vanished, essentially, from the NCAA, and Drake May was Drake May. The Syracuse secondary clearly wasn't up to task, right?
Not at all, and that's putting it nicely, Ian. It was a tough showing. And yes, you are playing Drake May, who is arguably the best quarterback in the country. But even if you look at that play from Kobe Pacer, that 78-yard touchdown pass, what is Elijah Clark doing? That was a bad throw from Drake May, and Clark somehow fails to intercept the ball. Even look at the touchdown to Nesbitt. Amon Greenwood just gets beat by a slower tight end. This secondary, which has been pretty good, leads the ACC in interceptions, looked really bad today.
Yeah, you brought up the Bryson Nesbitt touchdown, and that happened early in the second quarter. And it's simply Bryson Nesbitt having the size advantage, having the height advantage, and Syracuse not winning those one-on-one matchups constantly. You can do all the scheming that you want, you can play the right coverages and talk about all the X's and O's, but eventually it just comes down to, do you have the talent to match up with the guys on the outside? They just didn't have the better players on the outside today, and you see it with some of these highlights on your screen.
It's clear that while Syracuse might not have had the talent to keep it close in today's game, guys, there was one player who had a lot of talent, maybe talent to be a top 3 pick in next year's draft, and that's why he's our Orange Press Pass Player of the Game, quarterback Drake May. Quarterback last week was the player of the game for the other team, Cade Klubnik, and May continues the trend today. Over 400 passing yards. The third time in his career he's done that, and 3 touchdowns. He had over 300 yards by the start of the third quarter. There's a reason why he's a projected top 3 pick in next year's draft. He showed off the cannon that he has for an arm. The UNC legacy. His father played for this program in the 1980s, and he's a lot better than his father was, and he's going to be one of the best quarterbacks in maybe ACC history when it's all said and done. This game is history for Syracuse. They lost 40-7. When we come back, we'll see how today's game is going to impact our impressions of this team moving forward. Are we panicking, or do we have faith in the Orange when we come right back on Orange Press Pass?
Dad?
Just 1 minute, okay?
Hey, Bobo, do trees tell each other stories?
I'm sorry. I'm afraid I don't know that.
Hey, why don't we go find out? Listen.
Do clouds take naps?
I couldn't tell you.
Can birds draw pictures?
I don't have an answer for that.
Dad, do stars visit their friends?
Look!
Back on Orange Press Pass after North Carolina football's 40-7 win over Syracuse and Nicholas, alongside my good friends Ryan Bridges and Skyler Wilkes. I don't know how much good these guys have left to say after the biggest blowout of 2023, but you see it right there. Are these guys panicking? Are you guys good under pressure generally? No,
Not
you're
really.
not, Skyler.
I'd like to think so, but probably not.
Okay, so we've got a couple guys who are always panicking, and now they're going to tell me if they're panicking about the Orange's season. And we start with the wide receivers of this team. Ryan, Garrett Schrader, only 120 passing yards on the game. Separation's been a big issue, but how concerned are you with the group?
I'm very concerned, and it's not just because of what I think. I think it's because of what the offensive play calling has been showing so far in this season. After this Aranda Gadsden injury, you've noticed that, especially in this game, the Orange didn't have the confidence to throw the ball down the field. That tells me that Jason Beck, this offensive group, they don't trust the receivers to get down the field, and Garrett Schrader doesn't have the confidence to let the ball go. I'm at a 9 on a panic meter when it comes to this team and to these receivers, because what's going to change? Who's coming back? Who is going to make a difference in this team? I don't see it, Skyler.
You forget Isaiah Jones is back. He was back today, didn't do a whole lot, but he is back, which is a big get for Garrett Schrader. But like I mentioned before, only 8 yards per pass attempt today from Jason Beck and Garrett Schrader. They were not airing the ball out, and it's probably because Schrader doesn't have the ability to do so, like we saw last week with his 6 incompletions on deep balls. But Umari Hatcher deserves a lot of credit. This is a competitive UNC secondary. Elijah Huzzy, you saw the interception before. He's a talented player, one of the better corners in the transfer portal this year, coming over from East Tennessee State. And you look at Hatcher, 6 receptions, 85 yards. He's got big playmaking ability. And how about Donovan Brown getting more involved, and Dan Velarde, the cornerback transfer? I got to give the wide receivers a 5 because I'm just not concerned. I think it's more of an offensive thing, not a positional thing.
leave the Skyler Wilkes to work, East Tennessee State?
That's right.
In the
Go
Orange
Bucks.
Press Pass? He is the encyclopedia of college football. Skyler, you played wide receiver back in your playing days, but I'm going to ask you to go and dive into the trenches and tell me how panicked you are about the Syracuse offensive line, which has dealt with a lot of injuries.
As a former lineman, and you would probably know better than myself, but I am very concerned. I'm at 10 overall.
Oh,
which
no.
is, if you thought, as high as you could go.
That's scorching hot.
This offensive line has looked really bad. Garrett Schrader is constantly running for his life. They're second in the entire ACC in sacks allowed. You saw it last week, 5 sacks. He had no time, and today was more of the same. 6 QB hurries, a lot of shuffling in and out, a lot of injuries. David Woldog gone for the year. Joe Moore, the Richmond transfer, hasn't played the way you thought he would coming over. It's just been a rough year for that offensive line group.
I mean, Skyler, with the plays you're seeing on your screen, Garrett Schrader is having a lot of time to step up in the pocket, move around. He's just making bad decisions. Like I said, it has a lot to do with the receivers not being open downfield. You're asking this offensive line to block constantly, and you saw it with the fumble that got recovered by Syracuse. Garrett Schrader holding onto the ball too long, not trusting his guys downfield. Don't put this on the offensive line. They're giving them the time to throw. They're just not making the good decisions. You can't base the result around one position group that's actually playing pretty well right now.
Regardless of who we're going to put the most blame on in a blame game, they can't throw the football. 120 yards for Garrett Schrader and company, whether it's his fault or the line's fault. But they can't play the blame game right now. They still have a gauntlet of an ACC schedule to go, and they're still 2 wins away from qualifying for a bowl game. They got to a bowl game last year, Ryan. Hadn't got one previous to that since 2018. How panicked are you of them getting back to the postseason?
I'm kind of on the same page with my last one. I'm at a 2 right now. Not overly panicked about a bowl game. You gotta throw out the fact that this team has played 2 very, very good teams over these past 2 games. It's a step up in competition from what they've been playing, so it looks really, really bad. But if you look at some of the teams they got coming up on their schedule, Pittsburgh's only win was to Wofford. And then you look at the other teams that they're playing. Virginia Tech lost to Purdue. So if you played a little transitive property, you beat Purdue pretty badly. Virginia Tech, that seems like a team you can beat as well. I think Boston College is very beatable. The schedule gets easier here, Skyler. Don't look at the result. Look at the teams you got coming up. You were really good early on this season.
You said it before earlier in your point. Look at who they played earlier in the year. They played almost nobody's.
But that's
today.
the caliber of team that they're going to be playing going forward.
I don't know about that. Boston College is a team that beat Army today, and they barely beat Army earlier on in the year. I'm not super panicked about it just because you only need 2 wins to get to a bowl game, and they have a winnable opponent. You mentioned Pitt is not a very good team, and neither is Virginia Tech. Those should be winnable games, which can get you that 6th threshold, but with Florida State next week, and Ian, you harped on it earlier, after those losses started piling up last year, it all went downhill, and this team is worse. They have a worse roster than they had last year. What says that they can't start crumble and snowball after this loss?
Plenty of talent from last year's team went to the NFL, and last year's team did lose 38-3 at home to Florida State. That's the next opponent. That's also what our next Orange Press Pass will be, but this Orange Press Pass isn't done. We've still got more in store, although we're done panicking for now. On the other side, we'll talk about not only the national schedule, but the ACC slate and what's up next for the Orange.
Here's to the straggly ones, the lopsided ones, the first ones, the I miss my beard ones. But hey, I look good with this ones. But no way he's grown that in a week ones. The black, brown, red, and gray ones. That one. The itchy ones. The never forgotten ones. The ones grown by Dad. The ones grown for Dad. The started late ones. The absolutely filthy ones. The drawn on ones. The finger ones. The pin ones. The I nearly didn't do it this year ones. And the yeah, why not ones. They all raise awareness, raise funds, start conversations, and save lives. Because whatever you grow will save a bro. Learn more at Movember.com.
1 in 3 adults has pre-diabetes. That means it could be you, your favorite brother, your other brother, you, your football buddy, your football buddy. You, your plumber,
Breathe right into your foot.
your plumber's masseuse.
Yes.
You, your dog walker, your cat jogger. With early diagnosis, prediabetes can be reversed. Take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org.
Welcome back into our CitrusTV studio. Ian Nicholas alongside Ryan Bridges and Skyler Wilkes after North Carolina rolled SU 47 down in Chapel Hill. I promise, there were more competitive games around the country, and how about we take a look around the nation and see the other scores, and maybe another ACC score in that top left corner, Ryan. Louisville putting up a fight against Notre Dame.
Listen, Louisville's looked really good so far, 5-0, but they're getting their first true test today. They're hanging in there. We're really going to find out what this Louisville team is all about after beating some mediocre opponents, but a big matchup against Notre Dame right now.
Speaking of hanging in, Texas A&M lost, but kept it close with a top 15 Alabama team, 26-20. The Crimson Tide are not looking too hot. Barely beat USF, and now barely beating an unranked Texas A&M team. Not a great look for Nick Saban and company.
And also going to the bottom left in that corner, Florida State, Syracuse's opponent next week, gets through Virginia Tech after a tough first half. 39-17. Speaking of ACC scores, taking a look at the table, as they say over in England, the standings here in the country of the US of A. Florida State at the top, but you look at the bottom, Skyler, those three teams at the bottom of the top half of the standings, Syracuse still has to play all of them.
It's encouraging if you're a Syracuse fan that they're playing at the bottom of the barrel, but Ian, where is Syracuse on that screen? They're one of the teams that doesn't have a conference victory, 0-2 so far. It doesn't matter how well the other teams play. You have to play your brand of football, and Syracuse just hasn't done that so far early in this ACC competition.
It'll be interesting to see the top two teams that come out of the ACC because they're doing it a little bit different this year. They're not taking it from the Atlantic and the Pacific. They're just taking the top two teams in the conference. So a team like Louisville with a win today can sneak in to that ACC championship. An interesting year for the ACC in college football.
Yeah, who would have thought Florida State would be just this good? Speaking of the Knowles, when you watch Orange Press Pass again, that's the opponent on the other side. Down in Tallahassee, Ryan, what a test.
We raved about Drake May today. They're playing a quarterback that a lot of people think is just as good in Jordan Travis. They're going to have to contain him, keep him in the pocket. The Syracuse D-line, they got, kind of pushed around today by a really good UNC offensive line. They're going to have a tougher test next week, and it's a really talented Seminoles team.
That Florida State team is really good. Jordan Travis, that wide receiver for Keon Coleman is very special, but Jared Verse, I'm a huge fan. The edge rusher, top 5 pick in his draft, playing Syracuse now for the 3rd year in a row. We remember back with you, Albany, he is a special, special talent.
Jared Verse, Florida State probably found out about him when he chased down Sean Tucker in the Dome a few years ago. I know you remember that play well, Skyler. But when it's all said and done, at the end of the day, 40-7 is the final score, UNC between Syracuse this afternoon. But Ryan, what are you going to think about this game when you look back at it?
You can't just keep saying that the teams that the Orange are playing are just really, really good. That's what Dino Babers kept on saying later on in the press conference. He just kept saying these teams are just really, really good that we're playing against. Maybe they just don't have the players to compete in these games. It goes back to recruiting. When you can't even field a top 50 class in the country and you get consistently outplayed, when are we going to start asking the question, are the players on the field good enough? We blamed every single thing when it comes to play calling and stuff like that. You got to just wonder, what are the players as good as they can be?
Recruiting's not the only thing that needs to change, Ryan. The defense needs to change, the offense needs to change, the discipline needs to change. Justin Barron and Jane Bellamy, 2 members of the secondary, were the leading tacklers today, and Kevon Darden, a couple errant, unnecessary roughness penalties. This team, 7 game on the year, not a good look.
A lot needs to change, not a lot of time to make it happen. One thing that won't change, Orange Press Pass after a Syracuse football game. For Ian Nicholas, Ryan Bridges, and Skyler Wilkes, have a good one. We'll see you next week.